Welcome everyone to the second webinar of the knowledge series for 2022. We have a very unusual topic today, which is Vedic mathematics for aesthetic education. And the speaker we have today is Laura Aimo. Laura Aimo is Research Fellow in Aesthetics at the Catholic University of Milan, Department of Philosophy, Faculty of Education. Her field of investigation is aesthetic education. She weaves theoretical research with practical and artistic activity, leading courses for children, teenagers, and adults, and writing podcasts, film documentaries, and plays that combine logical and analogical thinking, different senses and capacities. She's author of 3 books. The last one, written with our Diodato, is called, I'm just going to say the name in English, An Idea of Aesthetic Education, edited by Morcelliana-Scholé. So she's going to talk to us about Vedic mathematics for aesthetic education. This is what she sent to us as her abstract. We're used to thinking of numbers just in quantitative terms and mathematics as a simple calculation. Vedic maths open up to unprecedented and qualitative horizons of number and to practices and processes that bring into play different faculties, not only logical, but also analogical, capable of squeezing together conceptual, imaginal, and metric dimensions of the individual and of the cosmos. For this reason, Vedic mathematics is an interesting field of investigation for aesthetic education, that branch of philosophy that studies not only the educational dimension of the arts, learning through or into the arts, but of every experience capable of holding together all those aesthetic abilities that distinguish the human being: perception, intuition, imagination, taste, and feeling. Welcome, Laura, and we are so fortunate to have you here and talk to us about Vedic mathematics for aesthetic education. Laura.
I thank you. I thank Swati and I thank the Institute for the invitation. And if you agree, shall I start? Okay?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay, I go. So, just if it works. Yes. Okay. This talk, just this one. Okay, this talk is about a short circuit, actually 2. Why? Because philosophers love short circuits. They reverse and recalibrate our common way of thinking. They open new horizons to explore and to inhabit. And the first short circuit relates to the nature and the direction of the relationship between Vedic mathematics and aesthetic education. And let's start from the terms maths and education. We usually think of mathematics as a body of knowledge related to numbers, space, quantity, order, calculation. And education, well, we are used to understanding it as a set of practices and techniques to convey a knowledge or to bring out skills. The underlying cognitive model is the classic representative one. We have a subject that learns, remembers, or recognizes something that we can call an object, and then the subject reproduces or applies it. But the nature of the mathematical object is still uncertain. Does the number really exist? Is it sensitive or oversensitive? Or is it an entity built by man? And why do the number and our operations with them work? As long as the nature of mathematical objects and processes remains unclear, it is clear, sorry for the word pun, that any pedagogical method in this regard will be equally approximate and not very effective. And I think that everyone's seen its effects in teaching at school. Well, my hypothesis is that Vedic mathematics allows to confront not only with the nature of the number, but also with the nature of science. As a result, Vedic Maths is an example and an opportunity for a wider possibility of intending and meaning what education is, or better, might be, what I call aesthetic education. Consequently, the question is a two-way relationship between mathematics and education possible? And if so, how? And here we come to the second tense point. It is connected to the adjectives of the sentence. The first question I am asked is, why do we need an adjective to define both mathematics and education? What function do the two adjectives play with respect to the reference known? And how are they able to connect the two disciplines, mathematics on the one side and the education on the other? I think that this point is very interesting if we think of the apparent distance between the ancient Vedic knowledge on the one side and the modern and European aesthetic branch of philosophy, the aesthetics, on the other. But it's interesting, even if we think that this qualification process is increasingly widespread in every field of knowledge, from medicine to the arts and technology. We use adjectives not to delimit the field of signification, but to broaden it. It is evident that it is a question of widening the boundaries of the mind, of repairing cultural fractures, but also to heal separation between human beings and nature, and ultimately within ourselves, in our body, soul, or whatever you want to call it. It seems that we are looking for a lost unit. But before going on, it's important to make some clarification. The first one is a premise. I'm neither a mathematician nor a philosopher of maths or science. I'm going to talk about a very basic level of Vedic mathematics. I want to bring out why it is interesting from a philosophical and educational point of view. I want to show how Vedic mathematics is a concrete and simple example and opportunity of aesthetic education. Therefore, don't worry, I think that everyone will understand, and I hope, I don't know if it will be fun, but I hope it's Saturday, and I thank all for the time and to spend it together. So my hypothesis is that mathematics is neither physics nor metaphysics, but a fictional activation of a virtual potential. And that could sound very strange and complicated, but we are going to understand everything together, don't worry. At the end, we will see that it's very easy. Mathematics is an aesthetic, is a creative thought. And Vedic method, in particular, offers an example of a Spieltrieb, a German word that means a play between sensitivity and reason, an imaginative process that's the core of every aesthetic education. About the method, I don't know, maybe James will tell me later if it is right or wrong, but I think that the method that I'm going to use to apply is very similar to the sutra transpose and apply, or turn back and unite. Why? Because The aim and the method of my speech is therefore to go to the bottom of these two short circuits to recirculate the energy between disciplines, faculties, cultures that we consider distant, different. But as we will recognize, difference doesn't rule out unity. So decomposing, deepening, and then reassembling the terms of our topic will be the tool to open new fields of research and to rediscover a unity between fields of knowledge, dimension of the world, and parts of the human being of ourselves. Well, I hope it. Well, let's start from the end. I will start from the second short circuit, and in particular from the second adjective, aesthetic, and the term connected to it, aesthetics. Well, and to make you participate in this investigation, I would like to ask you just for a few seconds, wherever you are, try to close your eyes, just a few seconds. Have you done it? Well, what is the first thing you visualize if I say the adjective aesthetic? Just capture the first image, the first images that you visualize. Well, the outcomes can be many and very different from each other. It's very funny because when I ask Italian people this question, many immediately connect the image of a beauty center, because in Italian, we call the beauty center also as an aesthetic center. In this aesthetic case, it immediately refers to the care of the beauty of the body, in this case, in the image of our hands, of the outward, of what is seen on the outside. But someone else might have thought of an artwork. Here I chose the Birth of Venus by Botticelli. Then someone else might have remembered an aesthetic experience in nature, something like a sunset or a photo, a picture of a sunset. But someone who is social media addicted, either consciously or not, might have thought of styles of aesthetics by which social fits are created. And of course, many other possibilities are possible. And maybe at the end, who wants, we share his own mental association. But what can we draw from these first impressions and associations? It is possible that most of the memories and images that have appeared are relating to the enjoyment or study of beauty. And now, let's try with another option. Please close your eyes, just a few seconds. And what changes if I say aesthetic education? What is the first thing you visualize and think this time? Well, it is possible that in this case, the imaginal field has narrowed. It is possible that everyone has seen one or more arts and they experience their training or awareness campaign of them. UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, considers and promotes aesthetic education as education through arts into the arts. And why? Because the arts are considered as a repository of cultural contents and values. and also as a set of processes for conveying contents and for training skills. But there is a problem. Is aesthetics just that? Well, the philosopher John Dewey said that the art is compared to the experience like a mountain to the art, or rather, its peak, its emergence. But both the mountain and the plain belong to the art. They are made of the same substance. What does it mean? That maybe, perhaps in the common sense and the images that we have previously visualized, there is something that needs to be recovered. And what is that? What have we lost during this little travel? So let's go back for a moment to the images we visualize. What do they all have in common? The body, the centrality of the body. Each aesthetic beauty treatment has to do with my external appearance, but above all, with the perception I have of it, with feeling beautiful, with feeling pleasure and love for my body and through my body. The same perceiving and feeling processes are involved when I look at an artwork, a natural show as a sunset or a picture, a photo. What would I mean? Aesthetic experience is something connected to me and something else. It's a relationship in which recognition and pleasure take place. Etymologically, this word aesthetic comes from the Greek aisthainomai, that means to perceive, to feel. Consequently, when I use the with the adjective aesthetic, I'm referring to a knowledge that cannot exist without the body, something that affects it, that affects me, but at the same time, it is not reduced to the body. There is something that exceeds the strictly physical dimension and cannot be fully explained or planed. Aesthetic experience happens and affects. I realize that I exist, that something other than me also exists, and that there is something that is bringing us together, although I don't get it fully. Well, when in 1750, the philosopher Baumgarten founded aesthetics, a specific branch of philosophy, he really wanted to recognize the value and meaning of these clear and confused ideas or perceptions. Traditional philosophy often omits or betrays them because they cannot be subsumed in one concept. They cannot be universalized. For example, what is beautiful for me can be not the same for you. But in this way, philosophy and every branch of science takes the risk to miss the singularity and the particular, the richness of life. And our daily life is guided by that, by these clear and confused ideas. We take the decisions according to them, according to something that we perceive and feel, something that often we are not able to define, yet we recognize. Aesthetics. Oh, I'm not reading the chat. Well, okay, I go on. Swati, tell me if there are any problems about something written on the chat. I go on.
No, no, no.
Okay,
You
okay,
can go. Those are for me. Yeah. Go on.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
Aesthetics means science of sensitive knowledge, and aesthetics takes care of them, of these clear and confused ideas. The aesthetics tries to show how they work. Consequently, aesthetics is the first step of any knowledge, because nature does not leap from obscurity to distinction. It is not a question of praising confusion, but of perfecting knowledge as confusion is mixed with it. But so, what is aesthetics about? It deals with processes and products connected to perception, imagination, intuition, taste, feeling, creativity, memory. And what is aesthetics about? Aesthetic education about? First of all, it is an education that takes these faculties into account. Faculties strictly connected with the body of each one, faculties in which the individuality of each one emerges, our unique relationship with other than ourselves. It aims at their free development away from external coercion and manipulation, or we try to do that. Secondly, aesthetic education enhances the wholeness, or rather the unity of the human being, her being an organism in which every capacity and part is connected to the other, inside and outside of herself. There is no mind decoupled from the body, no perceiving or understanding in which an imaginative process is not immediately involved. So we arrive to our point, we are arriving. What role do these aesthetic faculties play in the Vedic method? Well, a very big one. And I believe that anyone who started studying Vedic mathematics immediately felt valued many of these skills as imagination, intuition, and taste that the classical learning of mathematics usually excludes. Through Vedic method, mathematics no longer appears as a pre-established knowledge to be learned or remembered and then applied. Mathematics appears to be something magical. But what is magic after all? It is something that we may not be fully aware of, but that causes wonder. Something that gives results if applied to the nature. Something that cannot simply be performed, but implies entering into agreement and communion with processes and vital forces we cannot ultimately dominate. Vedic mathematics is perceived in the first instance as a trick. This is because one can immediately feel a complicity with it, with its figures, processes, and so on. How far we are from traditional maths. As I said at the beginning of my talk, maths is usually defined as a body of knowledge made of order, structure, measure, space, and number. And the model proposed is, or better, I'm always talking about the very first level, the very first teaching and training of maths. Well, the model proposed is mechanistic. Mathematical knowledge is as if it were a defined and a concluded word, foreign to me, which I have to know and apply if necessary, or if there are exams. Yet, as I have already reminded, nobody explains to us which kind of word the mathematical one is. Well, following the history of Western philosophy, nobody ever raises the question at school. Nobody explains how Pythagoreans consider numbers as the principles of all things, or Plato as dependent on supersensible ideas. Nobody shows if Kant is right, for which mathematics works in the sensitive world because things present themselves to us, given our mental structure, in mathematical characters. And what is the effect? A big confusion. Most of students don't like maths or have difficulties, even traumas with it. And why? Well, I can report my experience. I was good at maths. I also enjoyed it. But if I had ever been asked, would you prefer to solve an equation or to read or write a novel? I would have opted for the second option. Because the question was, what space for creativity do we have in math? And for personal taste, how can I express myself? Well, I perceive that a huge distance from humanistic knowledge until you discover that in maths. As James Glover wrote for me for a paper that will be published, that in mathematics is not in competition as an alternative or opposition to classical mathematics. It is a greater knowledge which encompasses it and which includes the desire to know, to discover, to find solution, and also the processes that make it possible. Through the Vedic Maths experience, the sense of separation typical of modern man, not to mention the fragmentation of contemporary man, seems to find a free zone, a place of health, a practice of freedom. And before going on, just I drink water, otherwise I can't talk anymore. Well, let's take some examples from very elementary experience about writing and counting. In Western culture, we usually read and write from left to right, but we count from right to left. Of course, I'm clearly speaking in general terms. It would be different if I had, for example, already taken into consideration Hebrew writing on the one hand, and different pedagogical approaches, such as Steiner's one, on the other hand. And I know also that in the Anglo-Saxon context, there is already the habit of counting from the left to right. But in Italy, for example, this is completely not the case. But let's go ahead. We write into a line and we count into columns. Why this difference? Early 20th century literature and also more recent creative writing have cleared up the possibility of writing not necessarily horizontally and in this order from left to right. But no one has ever granted such freedom to mathematical operations. Maybe when you become professor or a genius, a math genius, you can do that, and maybe you will do such discoveries. But until that moment, you can't. Not only. In our daily life, if I count the money in my wallet, I usually start from the largest banknotes to get to the smaller ones. That means from left to right. But if I use pen and paper, I have to do the reverse. Why? And which outcomes do we have? Well, it is clear that the invention of writing led to development of math. We know that some tribes in the world don't have the word and the idea of quantity of something bigger than 3. For them, the question, how old are you, doesn't mean anything. So as Caleb Everett writes, modernity and all related invention has been made possible by the development of mathematics thanks to the writing. Okay, we agree. But at the same time, we recognize how writing and coding has reduced our range of vision, pleasure, and expression. As it happens with every technique, and as Plato already guessed, the invention of writing has put many of our faculties to sleep. If writing is fixed and made immovable, it loses the fluidity of life and hinders our thought processes. Always seeking the paternity of mathematics and writing, who invented the numbers, who discovered the letters, and so on. Doing that, we have lost the maternity of both, the common matrix, imagination. As Kulikev noticed, studying some Sri Yantra, I hope to pronounce them well, that are meditative tools, artworks, and mathematical issues at the same time, the Indians should have had uncertified prior mathematical knowledge before the advent of writing. This means that we must presuppose a wider and higher oral and imaginative tradition, or anyway activity. The same processes that are at stake in the Vedic method. It is not a coincidence that with Vedic mathematics, I discovered the possibility of writing and content both in line and in columns and as across. I started to be able to express myself on the paper and therefore to think not only in the way I learned at school, just only in one way. I started to let the relationships and multiple movements of my neuronal synapses to be free. I started to fall and to develop my natural mind processes. And by doing that, I have perceived that there is no longer separation, but a mixture and a play between humanistic and scientific culture from the beginning. Let's go ahead with another example. Observing and actualizing. One of the first things that my Vedic Maths teacher told me was, look at the number, observe it. And at the beginning, it sounded a bit magical, but who practices Vedic Maths knows what it means. Numbers have a relational nature. 9 is 9, but it is also 10 minus 1, or 3 by 3, or 4 plus 5, and I could continue. It's like an infinity of open sets. And when I have to solve a problem, or simply to look for new paths of discovery, I can see, I can read, I can actualize the number in the way that is simpler, more favorable, more pleasant for me. Let's give an example. 16 for 14. That's the traditional method. And I have a multiplication, so I apply what I learned in column, and no matter the terms or the figures involved. But what do I observe? Both numbers have 2 digits. Both numbers have the same decade. The units are complementary to each other. But I see also that 14 is 7 for 2, and 16 is 8 for 2, or 2 to the 5th power. Consequently, I can follow different processes. I can follow the process captured in a synthetic and an affective way by several sutras. The first one could be this one, whatever the extent of the deficiency. But I have other opportunities, for example, by one more than the previous one, vertically and crosswise for proportionately. And of course, more processes are included in each operation. For example, yes, at the end, I can halve the 14 and the 16, I do 7 for 8, and then double the result twice. And there are other possibilities. In this last case, someone could tell me that it's a very long way. Another one could say that one method is easier than the other. But what is really important to me is that there are not only multiple ways, but that all these different paths arise from a common way of understanding and relating to numbers. Taking up Deleuze, and in particular Badiou's theory, math could be seen not as a thought about an object that exists. Numbers are neither separable nor inseparable, neither transcendent nor immanent. They are virtual objects, not possible objects, objects that lack just the existence, but virtual ones, and their value depends on the position and on the correlations and reciprocal movements. Mathematics treats as existing in actuality what exists only in potentiality. And Vedic Maths let you experience it since the beginning, from the elementary school and level, as we saw with the last multiplication, without needing to get to complex numbers or particularly complicated procedures. Vedic method is for everyone, especially for those who start studying with mathematics, because it leads to adopt an attitude based on discovery and creation that is typical of every science. In this way, think different doesn't sound anymore as a performative mantra, a workhorse of today's capitalism, nor a need to emerge and find one's place in mass uniformity. It is the very form of thought as a creative act into the difference into unity, including mathematics. What is interesting to note is that by studying Vedic mathematics, you open yourself to the possibility of multiple direction of investigation and solution, or better, I prefer to say that Vedic mathematics trains you in creative processes typical of our aesthetic nature. Why do I choose a method, a sutra, or a process over another? This remains a mystery. Sometimes it is a choice dictated by the fact of ignoring that there may be other possibilities. It's a limit, in this case, induced from the outside by the proper way of presenting mathematics. Other times, it is a personal preference built on multiple factors. What the Vedic mathematics allows is to open these possibilities, to give each one its raison d'être, and at the same time to recompose them in a unity of understanding and solution, thus amplifying our way of looking and acting in the world. Well, the time is running out, so just a mention of a topic that maybe I will deepen on another occasion. And it's about, yes, play and an aware being, and it is about beauty. As we have previously said, beauty is strictly connected to aesthetics. Baumgarten, the founder of aesthetics, define beauty as the perfection of sensitive knowledge, a phenomenal perfection. And phenomenal means what, how something appears to as to me. And this phenomenal perfection is sensibly intuitive. That means it cannot be demonstrated or deducted or inducted. And I need the body to perceive the beauty. But what is really curious is that Dirac, Nobel Prize for Physics in 1933, declared that beauty is a principle of mathematics and physics too. The beauty determines the preference for one theory rather than one other. But this clearly presupposes that there are maybe more theories equally valid or in any case justifiable. And this clashes with our common sense, with the perception we have of mathematics as an incontrovertible science. How is it possible? Clear and confused ideas that are the objects of aesthetics, and clear and distinct ones that are the objects of math seem to be very far from each other. Well, actually, there is a long history that links beauty and mathematics. According to the Western tradition, that is simply the tradition that I know, because it's the tradition that they have studied, that in which I am completely immersed. The ancient philosophers recognized the beauty in the number, in the proportion, in the symmetry, a beauty that is easily found in nature, a nature that we often judge as beautiful. But at the same time, we experience in our daily life how different the aesthetic judgment-based feeling of pleasure and displeasure might be. What I judge beautiful, for example, a butterfly, could appear ugly to you, and vice versa. Yesterday, I met a person that considered completely ugly the butterflies. The problem becomes bigger if you consider something created by man. I can follow Phidias' golden rules, but I will hardly make a statue as beautiful as this one. I can follow his numbers, his measures, but the result will not be the same. Not only, how do I explain the beauty of this Parthenon bust, even though it has no more arms, legs, and head? And regarding mathematics, how and why should one theory or process be more beautiful than another? All are based on logic. Which difference? The secret, not secret, lays in a change of view. Simplicity, harmony, and inevitability do not guarantee beauty. Beauty is neither in the object nor in the subject, but precisely in their relationship and correlation. At the same time, we also realize how everyone expects that the others recognize the beauty as he does. As Kant wrote, the aesthetic judgment on beauty as a pretension of universality. These have several consequences. First, as we are human beings, our cognition, and also a scientific cognition, is always an embodied cognition. And there are several aesthetic dimensions involved, from counting with our fingers to intuiting the result, seemingly skipping the in-between steps, or imagining new possible relationships between numbers. And any maths method has to take this variety into account. The second point is connected to the value of maths. Its importance, its practice doesn't consist only in looking for solutions in order to reach the truth or a profit. Maths is connected to something else that always characterizes us as human beings, in which we recognize ourselves and together overcome. It's something like a sort of taste and tension towards a correspondence. The last point is the consequence of everything. There is a unity between the subjects and the dimensions involved, as if man and nature chose the same path. An example, the Vedic loom that maybe someone has already met, used, and so on. Vedic loom, created by Angela Pieri, reproduces the Vedic square 949 numeral scheme. Every figure is represented by a hole on the board. Small supports can be inserted in the holes to connect the figures. Doing so, the image generated by each person's imagination becomes a concrete representation, offering higher freedom in depicting shapes and patterns. How? For example, that's a joke that I made with a friend. I could repeat it. I could take the 8s and I could join them with a thread. And what happens? That time happened that I recognized the profile of a leaf. And I didn't know, and I don't still know what it means, but it made me think, and it continued to make me think. Combining seemingly distant dimensions leads me to pleasure, and I find a unity among differences. But not only. Within the Vedic loom, this matrix of virtual relationships that I can continually discover and create, or better, actualize and experience, there is also place for what may appear imperfect or incorrect. So, turning back to our beginning short circuits, to our starting point, all these examples make me think of the definition that Arguelles, Mayan mathematics and art scholar, gave to the individual number. Number as a resonant field in itself, which represents a multitude of potential qualities and not just quantities, just like musical notes. But you have to play. And the difference might be in the practice, awareness, and pleasure. In closing, Vedic Maths is an example for me of aesthetic education, a play between sensitivity and reason, organism and environment, virtual and actual, a journey into multiplicity and the unity together, with reflexivity, awareness, and fun, if it is possible. So thank you for listening. I hope that it wasn't so boring.
Absolutely not. This was a great talk, Laura. And I will now ask James to kind of summarize and give our thank you note. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah? Yeah, perfect.
Hi, Laura. So thank you. That was brilliant. Brilliant. You've dealt with some of the really important aspects of philosophy of mathematics, as well as philosophy of nature and mankind. And of course, they're all connected, and many of your examples show this. But I think the real key is, well, for me, it was this aspect of sensitivity, where being sensitive to one's perceptions, ideas, the knowledge of mathematics, the play of the number, the different strategies that can be followed. All these things are part of our, in the widest and broadest sense, our sensitivity. And I think that's the real, like that's the area in which aesthetics it exists, lives. I personally would be very interested to hear what other people here in the webinar thought about when their eyes were closed and you asked those questions. So well, I could tell you what came into my mind. The first, when you asked the first question, my eyes were closed, and what came to mind was the head of a sunflower. So, because for me, aesthetic beauty is connected with the mathematical harmony that is so obvious when you see those spirals in the seeds of the head of the sunflower. Because the order and the order and the proportion and so on not only exist in the sunflower, but also in me, because I can be aware of it, of that. I can be aware of that order and harmony. So the fact that order, proportion and so on is seen in the sunflower, but also recognized in here, means that the sunflower and I are in harmony with each other.
Yeah.
And then when you ask the second question about aesthetics education, because I'm a professional teacher and I've been teaching for a very long time, I work in schools, I just thought of, well, the sharing of this with others, to put it simply. I don't know what anybody else.
I'm curious too. Just a note, because about what you said, that it's precisely what I mean. What I meant. Beauty is the perception of a communion, of a correspondence. You find yourself in the sunflower, and what is, I think, also for me is interesting to deepen that, of course, the sunflower isn't only these spirals, because of course I can draw perfectly also with computer the sunflower, but I think that I will not have the same experience because it seems something alive. And I think that's the point that I like, because philosophers and everybody that is about science likes to make experiments, okay? Think about Cartesio. Okay, think that we don't have a body, we don't have this one, and we don't have this one. And we think of a lot of things, but we are thinking in a body. And really, we don't know what means thinking without a body. That's the point. And the machine is something also else, and it's something created also by ourselves, so it's complicated. So just to point this one. But I'm curious to know about the images that you visualize.
Thank you, Laura. This is, I mean, for me, each slide had so much wisdom in it. Like, you know, when you were talking about like, what is Vedic mathematics, what is math, what is aesthetics in education, and how everything came together. This was really, really very enlightening and understanding a fresh voice when of how you can kind of look at it. Yeah. For me, when I was picturing, I was looking at a column because I have been too much. Column are those yantra rangolis. I'll send you some photos. Again, that's because it's like, it's again connected to maths, right? Like it's connected to maths. So that was what I was looking at. But we will open up to others. Anybody wants to share anything?
Yeah, I will share, Laura. It is an excellent lecture and I really enjoyed it. Actually, it has a lot of depth and really lot to think about and take from you. And really, I am looking forward to think and explore aesthetics and learn about it. What I thought when you told to close my eyes is basically mountains of Himalayas on which when early morning sun rays come, they just get, reflected and golden mountains looks. And it is something really, really, we get mesmerized by that particular scene and we become so small. But at the same time, as James said, we have that capacity to appreciate it. So we just don't realize that whether we are two different entities or we are same. So really, really, it's a really nice and actually it's lot of thinking is there. Actually, we have to think a lot about all this. Thank you very much, Laura. Yes.
Thank you. I don't see your name.
Prajakti.
Prajakti, yes. What I love, I think that also Plato said that I see a mountain, it is so bigger than me, but when I fall in love with someone, always, I fall in love with someone that I consider better than me. He has to be beautiful and wonderful, but if I'm able to recognize him, to see him, this means that I have the same beauty in me. And maybe it's someone virtual that needs to be actualized. That's the point. It's the same. It's the same trick, in my opinion. I don't know if other philosophers would agree, but I think that.
Anyone else would like to share something about their thoughts, about their comments about this wonderful talk that Laura gave us? I don't see anyone right now. Maybe it's a little late, but yeah, go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Laura, so much. Thank you. It was my first webinar on the Vedic mathematics. I have really never attended earlier, and recently I have found this Vedic mathematics, and it's so interesting. I'm getting mesmerized every day. Every day I want to learn more and more about it from here. I want to learn more and more. And the topic that was today, it was just mind blowing. I was just out of the mind when I was thinking about the beauty and all, and I was just thinking about the moon. Literally, you just said, no, just close your eyes and think about this. I was looking about the moon and I was just mesmerized about that. So it was a mind-blowing experience and a good. I'm looking forward for more webinars like this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's interesting what you said, because the moon is the symbol of reflexivity. And what one point that I hope that emerged that aesthetic doesn't consist only of perceiving or feeling or texting and so on, but it's always a process of reflexivity about that. It's not just to experience the experience, but you are aware of it. And what I appreciate about Vedic Maths is this thing. Well, I was lucky because I have a wonderful teacher that is online, but she is hiding herself. That is Angela, and from the beginning, I have experienced this thing that, of course, I can use intuition, imagination, and at the same time, I have the opportunity to understand why it works. And I think that it's, for me, the very big difference between traditional method and Vedic method. You don't lose anything. You have the both together, and we need it.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. If no one has any questions, we will close this webinar for now. And before we close, I really want to personally thank Angela also here for introducing us to Laura. And thank you, Angela. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We will share the recording of this presentation with you all shortly. Yeah, please take care. Take care. Bye-bye.